And there it is. Okay, so this is every single Pokemon that's ever been made. I mean, do you recognize every single Pokemon? Are you able to identify every Pokemon at any given time? Of course you aren't. There's over 720 Pokemon, and not all of them are entirely memorable. You might remember that from my first Top 10 Forgotten Pokemon video that I did about a year and a half ago. Well, since then, a lot of things have changed because now we have the 7th generation of Pokemon, and I also feel like enough time has passed to where we're starting to forget about some 6th generation Pokemon as well. Now, to bring back the idea for the video, but also spice it up a bit, I want to make it about only 5th, 6th, and 7th generation Pokemon. Yes, even 7th generation Pokemon have made it onto the list, and that's kind of the idea right here. Somehow, some of the newer Pokemon have already fallen through the cracks, and we have to think about, like, wait a second, these are already forgotten? So let's do a list on the top 10 already forgotten Pokemon, and number 10 is going to be Bruxish. It's just kind of like a scary, toothy triggerfish. There's not a lot of things that are memorable about the Bruxish, that we already have pink fish-like Pokemon, at least a Lomomola. You think about it, because it's a pretty ferocious, competitive Pokemon. It wants to stall you out all day long, and it has a nice little bit of wish support, so you will see it from time to time. As for Luvdisc, it would normally be a very forgettable Pokemon, but I think the hours and hours spent grinding heart scales have kind of just burned it into everyone's brain. But now that you can buy heart scales in Pokemon Sun and Moon, if that trend continues into future Pokemon games, maybe we'll be talking about Luvdisc being on the forgotten Pokemon list. But let's get back to Bruxish. Yeah, there's not much about this Pokemon. Like, its ability is kind of cool, but the Pokemon isn't good enough to actually use, so we don't even get to see its ability. And then, yeah, it uses biting moves, and apparently it's a Psychic type. There's not much going on. Like I said, it's just another fish Pokemon. It's kind of a colorful fish Pokemon, but doesn't really stand out even with all of its patterns and stuff. It just kind of, yeah, it's there, and I don't even think it's that cool of a Pokemon. Number 9 on this list, we have Barbaracle. Now, Barbaracle, I feel, is pretty interesting when it comes to forgotten Pokemon. I feel like I've personally helped Barbaracle not fall into obscurity because it's a Pokemon I loved using competitive, and I brought it up all the time. You can see some of my older videos, you know, perfect 6-0 Pokemon. If Barbaracle gets a Shell Smash, it's over for your opponent. Also, Barbaracle is just straight up busted because of the amount of damage it has, and also it's like one of the faster, hardest hitting Shell Smash Pokemon, so if you're going to use it, it's going to work out pretty well. However, it probably belonged to be on the original top 10 forgotten list because, yeah, outside the competitive, you know, it didn't really go through as much as I wanted. I tried to keep it alive, and then as we got into Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire and into the 7th generation, just haven't really picked it up again. And unfortunately, Barbaracle wasn't even obtainable in Pokemon Sun and Moon, so I didn't even have an opportunity to use it before Pokemon Bank came out. Pokemon Bank came out, and it's like, yeah, I didn't even use it. So even a Pokemon that I've spammed and used a lot in the past, it's kind of gotten forgotten just a couple short years. So unfortunate, but hey, kind of shows how the list ends up playing out. For number 7 on the list, we have Stantler. I mean, Sawsbuck. I actually forgot this Pokemon's name, so I had to redo this part of the video, and I decided, hey, let's just incorporate that in as a joke, so hopefully that joke worked out. But at the end of the day, yeah, like, it's kind of a forgettable Pokemon. We know we have 4-legged animal Pokemon. It's a deer, so it kind of stands out because we don't have many deer Pokemon, but at the end of the day, 4-legged animal Pokemon. Now, a weird thing about this Pokemon Sawsbuck, again, I literally almost forgot. I'm not doing that for the video at all. I just can't remember this thing's name. I remember Deerling more, but then as we get into the evolution, yeah, it didn't get used at all, and it doesn't really matter too much. Now, something to note about the Sawsbuck is that it actually has a unique gimmick. And a lot of Pokemon that end up being on this list have some kind of gimmick, yet at the same time, it's not enough to save them, that they can still be forgotten even though there's something cool going on with them. That Sawsbuck, a lot of people are actually big fans of Sawsbuck because it changes depending on the season. And a lot of people were pretty hype about the seasons feature that was introduced in the 5th generation. So it's like, yo, we have a Pokemon that interacts with that. How cool is it? And it does make a bit of sense thematically, that for the mating season, male deers actually grow their antlers, and then they end up shedding them once the mating season is over. Now, while Sawsbuck always keeps its antlers, it does show change throughout the season, so I think it's pretty cool and it works out. Unfortunately, there's not much else about the Pokemon that really stands out, and it doesn't really get used much in competitive, or doesn't even get that much of a spotlight in the games itself, so really, yeah, they kind of get forgotten, unfortunately. Number 6 on the list, we have Pyroar. Now Pyroar, again, another Pokemon with an interesting little gimmick, that we have gender differences that are very pronounced to where they almost look like different Pokemon. And also Pyroar have inverted gender differences as well. Normally it's 12.5% to find a female Pokemon of a species, but with Pyroar it's the other way. That's only 12.5% for the male version, so it means you're going to be seeing the female one more often, and it still doesn't really matter. Even though it's like slightly above average on the speed stat, and then also kind of decent but not super hard hitting on the special attack stat, we just don't see it. Fire normal typing, yeah, there's a lot of better fire sweepers out there, and then the normal doesn't really contribute much for coverage, so it just kind of sits there and looks pretty, has gender differences, but doesn't really have much else going for it. So yeah, Pyroar, even though people were kind of hype about Litleo, I feel like Litleo got buried under all the other Pokemon. Like, yo, we have Go-Goat, we have a goat Pokemon, how cool is that? We have Pancham, we have a panda Pokemon. Well, what about the lion Pokemon with gender differences? Nah, it's alright, and it doesn't really bring too much else that's special, so because of that, just ends up being forgotten. Number 6 on the list, we have another 7th generation Pokemon, and I'm gonna put Toucannon on the list. It's kind of bold because it is a bird, that we have a regional bird Pokemon, so how can it be forgotten? You know, you run into Pikipek, you even see Trumbeak around. Well, I feel that Toucannon just kind of drops off super hard, that you don't see it competitively, and even though it is one of the Pokemon that has a very powerful ability at the same time, Skill Link. That's a pretty solid ability. It also has an exclusive move. So again, another unique aspect on a Pokemon that doesn't really work out. Yeah, Beak Blast, that sounds awesome, but unfortunately it doesn't even see that much play. You know, Toucannon's stats don't really justify it taking a hit to maybe burn the opponent and do a good amount of damage back. And then you also have the Skill Link ability, so don't you want to be utilizing that over using some kind of signature move like the Beak Blast? It doesn't really make sense. Now, I think it's an awesome idea. You know, Toucannon, that's a pretty baller name, and the design is pretty cool as well, but then there's just other more memorable generational birds. You know, it's like you think about it, yeah, Pidgeot's just freaking cool. And then Talonflame has just burned itself into our hearts whether we wanted it to or not. And even then, Swellow and Staraptor just, I know and remember Swellow and Staraptor, but here, just a year after Pokemon Sun and Moon, I'm just like, man, Trumbeak is whatever, and whatever is just kind of slow decline into forgetting a Pokemon. And it's really unfortunate too, because I remember when Pikipek was revealed and he was doing his little head bobby thing, I was like, this is one of the greatest things ever. Oh my god, Pikipek is adorable and awesome. I can't wait to see what happens. Not saying that it disappointed me, but it also didn't make much of an impact on me either, and that's kind of upsetting. And now it's time for number 5 on the list, and that is going to be Clawitzer. I don't have anything to say about Clawitzer. It's actually kind of weird. You'd imagine that a Pokemon with a freaking Mega Launcher cannon arm would have you'd have a lot to say about. Like, I think its design is cool, but that's kind of like, it's cool, but it doesn't do much. It doesn't work out competitively, and that really is unfortunate. I think because of that, I'm just going to kind of give my explanation as to why I feel competitive viability is the biggest factor to if a Pokemon is going to be memorable or not, and that's when you just break down what Pokemon is. Pokemon's about catching and training Pokemon to battle other people that have caught and trained Pokemon. Now, competitive isn't the only way to battle Pokemon, but it's not cool if you lose to your friend all the time because a Pokemon isn't really doing that great. Now, on this channel, I try to bring out the best in every Pokemon. You know, every Pokemon, I feel, is usable to some degree, but that means that for the most part, it's going to take that special person that wants to dedicate a lot of time to that Pokemon and really unlock their power, and if that doesn't happen, then they are going to be forgotten. That the way I see it is that once the credits are done rolling, that's all that Pokemon's going to get. You might catch it, you might use it in the story, you might have it on your team, you might beat the game with it. After that, the only way a Pokemon can be memorable for years is that if you're using it regularly in battle, or if it gets used at all. I haven't seen Clawitzer since like Pokemon X and Y in the early days of Pokemon X and Y, and it sucks, but that's how Pokemon is. So yeah, I do feel that's the breakdown right there, because you have to be the best like no one ever was, and if the Pokemon doesn't help you get you there, then it's going to be forgotten, even though, again, like I said, like I keep saying on this channel, every Pokemon has a use, and that's why maybe you should try to make that Pokemon more memorable if you don't like it being called a forgotten Pokemon or something like that. Number 4 on the list, we have Brawler, and we also have Crabominable. I was just not having it with any of these Pokemon right here. Like, I love the 7th generation Pokemon designs. I feel that everything about the 7th generation just worked with the introduction of the new Pokemon, except for Brawler. When I first saw Pokemon reveal, I was unimpressed. I was like, this thing looks stupid. Evolution looks even dumber. So remember what I just said about like finding a Pokemon and making it memorable? I'm okay if that doesn't happen with these guys. Like, they just don't work for me, and they also don't work competitively, and even then, for the storyline, you find them by interacting with berry trees. Now, if you're not interacting with berry trees on the right day, you might not even see a Crabrawler, and you might not have the opportunity of evolving it into a Crabominable. So there's just a couple of other factors that, like, yeah, it's not really that usable, and you kind of have to go out of your way for it, so I could see it easily being forgotten. That's just another Pokemon. It's like, yeah, it's whatever, so let's kind of forget about it. There we go. Number 3 on the list, we have Aromatisse. Now, what I'm going to say about this Pokemon is that it feels like it has a cool theme going for it. Especially going like Spritzee into Aromatisse, yeah, it feels like there's something there. And even with like the dual rollout, you know, we had this announcement that it was also with Slurpuff. And they have these similar evolutionary lines. You have to do a little bit extra, you know, trade them, special item, boom, that's how you get the evolution, and it should work out pretty well. Now, while I don't have anything against Slurpuff or Aromatisse's design, it feels like a greater part of the community just doesn't really care for it. You kind of have to go out of your way to catch it, kind of also have to go a little bit more out of your way to evolve it, and what's the point, because you're not really going to use it that much either. That kind of brings up another thing to bring about this video, that another way a Pokemon can be forgotten is if it's just not released for a while. Then we look at Pokemon X and Y, that's the last time Spritzee was available. So that means you have to go into Pokemon X and Y to catch this thing, and then you trade it into Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, or you Pokemon Bank into Pokemon Sun and Moon. Another thing that helps you to forget about Pokemon is also the Pokemon Bank. That with Pokemon Sun and Moon, we didn't have access to it until Pokemon Bank came out, and then it's kind of like, well, is it worth getting it into Pokemon Bank, or is it worth even going back to Pokemon X and Y, catching it for the first time to bring it into the 7th generation Pokemon? It seems like that due to its releases, you know, it didn't get any kind of other attention in the newer Pokemon games, so that's something that also helped to it being forgotten. Like, look at Barbaracle. Mirage Islands only in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, and it can only be done with Rock Smash, and that's how you get the Binnacle. And then when it comes to Sawsbuck, you either get Sawsbuck in the Friend Safari, or Deerling is a hidden Pokemon, so it's kind of like it didn't even exist that easily to be obtained in the 6th generation, and then again, no love in Pokemon Sun and Moon versions, so I think that does contribute to a Pokemon being forgotten. As for number 2 on this list, starting to get to the big boys, and that is going to be Bahia. Man, I don't even know what to say. Bahia just feels out of place in so many ways. It feels out of place as a Pokemon. It even feels out of place as an alien Pokemon. That there's alien Pokemon like Clefairy, Clefable, and Deoxys, and they fit in a lot better. You can recognize them as Pokemon. They feel like Pokemon in their own way, but Bahia really doesn't. And also, I feel like Game Freak even forgot about Bahia. Let's take a look at TM51. Well, in Generation 5, it was Ally Switch. Makes sense on the Bahia. In Generation 6, it was Steel Wing, and Bahia still remembers the Steel Wing as TM51, but it doesn't make a lot of sense for Bahia. Did Game Freak forget about it? Now I do see a lot of people commenting like, oh man, but it's Area 51, so Game Freak is just kind of keeping that in there. For starters, is it really worth doing something so strange to Pokemon's moveset just for some kind of theme? And 2, do you think Japan even cares about our alien conspiracy theories? Not really sure about that, but even if we go further into that, again, just was not obtainable for a long time. It got forgotten in the 6th generation, because look at this. We have trade only in Pokemon X and Y. So that means you couldn't obtain it for the beginning of the 6th generation. It was just one of those Pokemon that until Pokemon Bank came out, it was just unobtainable completely. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, it's a hidden Pokemon, and then Pokemon Sun and Moon, it's Pokemon Bank. So really, we have to go back into the 5th generation games until it feels like Bahia is somewhat achievable. That's kind of crazy to think about. Then also, for both new generations, it was a Pokemon that was only obtainable after Pokemon Bank had been released. So once again, it's like, oh yeah, Pokemon Bank's out. Do I care about Bahia? Do I care about going back into previous games and getting Bahia? No. I think the only reason why it's not number 1 on this list as well is because we recently had the Pokemon Mystery event. And that was for like the Pokemon Daisuke Club, and that was with like, oh man, what's happening with Pokemon Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon? Are we going to get any new information? Well, they did have the Pokemon Mystery Files, and that included Elgyem. So because that's like, oh yeah, Elgyem, Bahia, alien Pokemon, mysteries. I guess it's a bit more memorable, but it still doesn't get used that much competitively, and then also it's just out of place. And it just doesn't really work. It seems like Game Freak doesn't really care about it either, so that helps to us forgetting about it. And now it's time for number 1 on this list, and much like Barbaracle, it saddens me to say Avalugg. Avalugg, what happened? It had so much promise, you know, it has a good moveset, has some of the highest defensive stats in the game, and it doesn't really feel like it's that crippled. It's like, it's a pure ice typing. it doesn't have like some kind of 4x weakness that's going to absolutely destroy it. It just comes in, it feels like it should do its job well, and it doesn't. I used it a lot in Pokemon X and Y. I tried to pick it up in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, just didn't feel it working with my team, and now I haven't even touched it in Pokemon Sun and Moon. And again, it's Pokemon that hasn't really been made that obtainable, but it's also really not that great competitively, and I don't even know what else to not say about it. Yeah, it's just Avalugg. Like, that's definitely a Pokemon on this list where you're like, wow, you're right. Avalugg is a Pokemon. Bergmite is a Pokemon. When did that happen? You know, it's like, it's a 6th generation Pokemon. I remember it being cool. I remember some people trying to use it, but then it just didn't work. And then it got completely forgotten. It's like amazing how completely forgotten it was. And I think that's what I'm going to use to end it on this video. So if you guys enjoy the video, hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.